Can I make a month of meals for under £150 and in under 5 hours? Let's put it to the test. The first thing I'm going to do is get my slow cooker on and make a bolognese, which I will then use for a few different meals. Now, I don't know about you, but I have found the cost of mince has just been going up so much in the supermarket. So I'm going to be bulking this bolognese out with some tinned lentils, just so that I needed to buy slightly less mince. So let's get assembling. Firstly, I brown off some mince with some frozen garlic cubes until it's brown all over, and then I put to one side. Then I put everything into the slow cooker, starting with the mince, followed by my lentils, some chopped up frozen veggies, passata, 2 beef stock cubes, and some tinned chopped tomatoes. Now, I actually forgot to put a bay leaf in my bolognese this time. I did remember the tomato puree, my seasoning and herbs, but a bay leaf in there really sets it off nicely. Now that the slow cooker is on, I'm going to pop my sweet potatoes in the oven. Now, this is a really fun trick that you can do to make pizzas slightly more nutritious. So watch out for later on when I show you how I'm going to turn these 2 sweet potatoes into some great freezer-friendly pizza bases. This is such a great way to make the most of the oven when it's on, and it gets the sweet potatoes to just the right consistency that you're looking for the recipe coming up later. I'm also going to put in the oven a whole chicken to roast. This is something I do in every batch cook, as you can stretch the meat out across a couple of meals, which I will show you later once it's done. The next recipe is another favourite of mine and is such a great time saver. I think a lot of people are put off the idea of doing big batch cooks because at the face of it, it does sound like quite a lot of cooking. But this recipe is another example of how you make one base recipe and you can turn it into a few different things. So watch out to see what I'm going to turn these roasted vegetables into later on in the video. If you're new to my channel, I'm always looking for ways that I can save time in the kitchen. I love cooking and I like trying out new recipes, but if you're a parent, you will understand that when you have young children, life does kind of get in the way, and especially when you're coming home from school after clubs, the last thing you want to be doing is looking in the fridge and thinking, what on earth am I going to make, and cooking a full-blown meal from scratch. It's definitely true to say that the more time you spend doing something, the faster you get and the little systems that you find that work for you. I'm fortunate that I have 5 hours today where I can prepare a month of meals. But if you don't often have that sort of time on your hands, you don't need to do a whole month in one go. You could, say, put the slow cooker on and do a double portion and then save all of the leftovers. Or you could make a few dump bags in the evening. The important thing is to make it manageable and fit in with your lifestyle, as then you're more likely to do it. Final step is to add some chunky pieces of red onion, followed by a whole bulb of garlic, which I'm just going to nestle into the middle there. I'm now just going to give it a drizzle with some olive oil, season with some herbs, and finally a pinch of salt, and that will now get roasted in the oven until it's all caramelized, and I will do the next step of the sauce. This just looks so tasty. I can't wait to see how this comes out. So I'm now going to make the cheese sauce, which will be used across a couple of different meals. Again, I love any chance to make efficiencies when I'm doing a batch cook. And the first step is to empty out my frozen butternut squash, blitz it up in the microwave so it's nice and soft, and then I'm going to show you a trick that I do to hide some extra nutrients in my sauces. So one of my favourite tricks for sauces is to add in tins of blended butter beans. And the next sauce I'm making is the perfect carrier for these butter beans. It's mac and cheese, and it's flavoured with butternut squash and lots of extra mature cheddar. So these tins just blend into the background. They bulk the sauce out, They make it extra nutritious for the kids, and they only cost £1 for 2 tins. So it's a great way to add a little bit of extra nutrients without busting the budget. After I've rinsed my butter beans, I start by making a really simple roux with butter and plain flour. And at this stage, I always add a little bit of mustard powder in, as I find that makes the sauce really tangy. Now you have to be patient with this step, gradually adding the milk until you have a smooth consistency, ready to add in your butternut squash and butter beans that have blended up beautifully. This adds a lot of flavour to the sauce without making it taste too much of beans. The last step is to add a generous handful of mature cheddar cheese, your seasonings, and then pop in the fridge to chill. My chicken has just come out the oven and is looking excellent, so I'll get this onto a plate and shred it. Now I'm going to make a really easy pesto, and I think once you learn how to make pesto at home, you won't want to buy it from the shop again. It could not be easier, and you can really adapt it to what you want it to taste like. So today I am not putting any pine nuts in mine because I want to be able to give it to the kids in school as leftovers in their lunchbox. So I've got some spinach, I've got some basil, I've got some lemon juice. I'm going to put some olive oil in there as well. Now I've got 2 extra tricks of things that I like to hide in my pesto. The first being some blended up butter beans, because no one notices they're there. And seeing as I bought some frozen edamame beans for a recipe that's coming up, I thought I would use some of them in this pesto, as it just adds a bit of extra diversity of ingredients. And again, you just don't notice that they're there. I'm going to microwave the edamame first, just to soften it up so that I can blend it. So you kind of have to do this in stages. I like to start with the butter beans first, and then I put in some lemon juice. I just get the squeezy bottle one from the shop. Next up, I'm going to put in the olive oil that is needed for this recipe. Now I'm going to add in the microwaved edamame beans. Now the edamame and butter beans have been blended, I'm just adding in my basil and spinach, and I will blend this in batches. And there we go, it's looking really good. Now it's always important at this point to give it a quick taste. Now everyone's tastes differ. You might decide to put pine nuts in yours, or you might decide to put parmesan in, but to keep costs down, I've kept this without cheese. And then it's just a case of portioning it out between your dishes. And you'll see from not that many ingredients, you can get a pretty substantial portion of pesto. And if you're watching in the UK, I bought these glass containers from Home Bargains, and I've been really impressed with them. They were such good value, and they're perfect for this sort of thing. Now we're going to move on to one of my favourite time savers when batch cooking, and that is making dump bags. Now, if you haven't heard of a dump bag before, essentially you just take a freezer bag and fill it with the ingredients you need to make a meal. Pop it in the freezer and then put it in the oven, air fryer, slow cooker, whatever machine you're using, and you'll have a meal ready with very little effort at all. Now, in my first batch cook videos, a lot of my dump bags were primarily for the slow cooker. But this time I'm mixing it up a bit and I'm using my air fryer a bit more. We still do have one slow cooker meal in there, don't worry, and it is an absolute favourite of ours. Now, my kids are not big fans of tofu, and to be honest, neither am I, really. But I have found a way to crisp it up, coat it in the most delicious seasoning, and make it really crunchy in the air fryer, and it makes, honestly, the most delicious meal. You can serve it deconstructed for the kids, and for the grown-ups, you can add the most delicious garnishes on the top. So let's get started. The key with tofu is to try and dry it out as much as you can before you cook with it. So I'm going to try and press the moisture out to give it a good chance of being nice and crispy. So I don't know about you, but we are buying a lot less meat than we used to. Partly because the kids don't actually really like meat that much. Also because I'm finding that it's getting a lot more expensive to buy things like mince and some of the meats that we used to have quite often. Tofu is such a great alternative cost-wise, but I think the key is learning a way to cook it that you really like. So I'm just going to cut my tofu into some chunks. Now, the smaller you do them, the crispier they're going to go in the air fryer. Before discovering this meal, the only way our kids would eat tofu was in its silken tofu form, where I would blend it up with dark chocolate, cacao powder, maple syrup to make the most delicious chocolate ganache for a cheesecake. So these have all been cut up. Just give them one last pat. And now I'm going to coat them in some seasoning. So I mix them with corn flour, onion granules, garlic granules, and some smoked paprika. I put the tofu in and stir it up to combine. So now that's done, I'm going to pop them into their freezer bags, and then I will defrost thoroughly the night before and cook them in the air fryer. And as you'll see, cooking in them in the air fryer, they've come out so crispy, ready to have some delicious sauce and garnishes added on top. So the next stump bag that I'm going to be making is an absolute favourite of ours. This one does go in the slow cooker and is just so delicious. Everybody likes this meal, and it's called Marry Me Chicken. It's such a simple sauce. It is very easy to prepare. And on the day, all you have to do is add a little bit of cream cheese, some parmesan, and some frozen chopped spinach, and you're all set. So pop some garlic in. And I absolutely love these garlic cubes. They're so much better and so much cheaper than buying the chopped garlic in the shop. Then I've got a stock pot going in each of these. I don't add the water to go with the stock into the bags, as I will add that when I turn the slow cooker on. Next, I'm going to add some onion, followed by some chopped sun-dried tomatoes. If you're watching from the UK, I like to buy sun-dried tomatoes in Aldi or Lidl, as they're a lot cheaper than in the supermarkets. And they're really what gives this its really delicious flavour. Next up, I'm going to add some oregano. And I tend to add my salt and pepper once I've tasted the sauce after it's cooked, as it can be quite salty, this meal, with the sun-dried tomatoes. And then finally, I'm going to add my chicken thigh. And I have tried to move over actually to using chicken thigh a bit more in these sorts of recipes, because it's a lot more cost effective than using chicken breast. Someone once commented on another YouTube video I did where I made Marry Me Chicken and said that you can actually do this one with chickpeas as well, as it's the sauce that really makes the flavour of this and really makes it super tasty. So those are now done. They'll be packaged up, and then when I'm ready to cook them, they'll go into the slow cooker with some water for the stock, and then they'll be finished off with some cream cheese, parmesan, and some chopped frozen spinach. This recipe is always a win in our house. The kids will be guaranteed to ask for seconds when this is served. So this next recipe is another air fryer meal. And I'm going to do this in 2 stages, as there's 2 separate steps of ingredients that I need to pre-assemble. So first of all, I'm going to put some peppers, onions, and sausages into the bags. I will always spend a little bit more on sausages because I like to get ones with a very high pork content. But often you can get these on special offer. These ones were on special offer in Sainsbury's when I bought them. So this is the first step done, as these items all cook together at the same time in the air fryer. The next step is just to portion out the potatoes. So these actually go into the air fryer before the sausages and the peppers, so that they can just roast and crisp up a little bit before we add the sausages in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to season them in these bags and also freeze them, so that then again, you just need to tip it into the machine. So I'm going to put a bit of oil in here, and then just some herbs. Again, you can put whichever seasonings work for you. I might pop a bit of salt and pepper on when they're cooking. And once I've sealed the bag, I'm just going to give it a shake. And now, as you can see, all of the potatoes are now nicely coated in that herby seasoning and will be ready to just go straight into the air fryer. On the day of cooking, I make up a really simple sauce with garlic, soy sauce, honey and mustard to coat the sausages and create a delicious sticky glaze. Earlier on we made some pesto sauce, and instead of having it in our usual way with just a bit of pasta, this time we're going to enjoy the pesto in a roasted vegetable gnocchi bake. I've done this one before in the air fryer and everybody loved it, so it was going onto the rotation for sure. As with the other recipe, there are 2 stages to the cooking process. So the veggies will be frozen separately. And I recently discovered this in Aldi. So you can buy a 1 kilogram bag of gnocchi, and actually this works really well for this bake. And as with my potatoes earlier, I'm just going to pop a little bit of oil in here and some seasoning, as that helps the gnocchi go nice and crispy and crunchy before you put the pesto sauce on it. It's so simple, but comes out so well every time. And last but not least, on the dump bags, I always like to try something new. And this month I'm trying an experiment. So I'm going to roast up some peppers in the air fryer with some tortelloni. And I recently tried doing crispy roasted ravioli with a tomato dip, and it actually worked really well. So I feel like this could be really good too. The only difference is I'm going to serve this with the hidden veg pasta sauce that I made earlier. Now, because we are 2 adults and 2 small children, I'm splitting 3 boxes of this tortelloni between the 4 of us. So you may need to alter the portion size depending on your family and your appetites. I'm going to coat these in a little bit of olive oil and some seasoning, as that again will help them crisp up in the air fryer. Packing these bags, you want to just leave a little hole here, try and push the air out of the bags, so it'll just help them pack a bit flatter in the freezer. You literally tip all of the contents of the bag into the air fryer and cook until golden and charred. Then it's a case of stirring in your hidden veg sauce, topping with cheese and grilling until crispy and bubbling. I'm so delighted with how many dump bags we have got in the freezer ready for this month of meals. It shows just how much you can get done in not very much time at all. My chicken is now out of the oven, so I'm going to shred it and turn it into 2 really easy to assemble meals. And I think when you're cooking stuff from scratch, it's easy to fall in the trap of thinking that you have to make every element from scratch and you can't take shortcuts. But as I've done a few of these batch cooks now, I've found ways to just be a little bit more efficient with my time and use handy shortcuts, like the one I'm going to show you next. So my chicken has been shredded, and my first shortcut is to make some chicken enchiladas using these taco beans. Now I'm actually trying the Aldi ones today. I didn't realise you could get them in Aldi, maybe they've just started selling them. But they do look quite watery. So I'm going to sieve them off and then just add the liquid in as I need it. I feel like I've made the mistake too many times of just pouring in something like this and then realising the mixture is far too wet for what I have had it intended it for. There we go. So I've removed quite a lot of the liquid. I'm just going to pop the beans into the bowl. So I've got my bean mixture. I'm going to jazz it up by just adding a little bit of extra paprika in there, because after a quick taste, it does taste quite tomatoey. And then I'm just going to take some of my chicken, pop it in. Now, I'm glad I drained the liquid off, because as you can see, that doesn't need any extra liquid adding to it. So if I was just making this for adults, I would add some sweet chili sauce. But as my kids won't tolerate that, I'm just going to add a bit of honey just to balance out that tomatoey taste. So that's my first meal sorted. I'll show you what that's going to turn into in just a moment. Next up on the chicken recipes is one of my mum's signature recipes. She loves making coronation chicken, and I did an experiment last month at making some more 80s inspired meals. And the way that we enjoyed the coronation chicken was just so delicious, I had to put it on the menu again. So you simply take some mayonnaise and some mango chutney. Then you add in some curry powder and just give it a stir. Then give it a little taste and see if it's to your liking. I quite like that on the first go, but you might find you need to add a little bit more mango chutney or a bit more mayonnaise if you put too much curry powder in. So I'm just going to literally put the chicken in, and then this will just get coated in this sauce. I guess it's kind of like a marinade. You can add some sultanas to this if you want to. My kids quite like the sultanas. I would say not to add too many, because this is going on top of a pizza. They do catch a little bit in the oven. So I've restrained myself with the sultanas this time. So that's mixed up. I'm going to pop it into 2 freezer bags, and then that will be ready to assemble on the night that we're going to be enjoying this meal. Because this is a recipe that my mum is very good at making, whenever I host an event with my friends, there is always some kind of coronation chicken sandwich or wrap on the menu. And I recently challenged myself to host a baby shower for one of my oldest friends for less than £70. Because when we looked at getting catering in, it was coming in at over £200 for the amount of people we had. So coronation chicken was definitely on the menu. Now, if you're a vegetarian, you can actually make this with chickpeas. And I learnt that at one of my kids' christenings because my friend's partner is vegetarian but didn't want to miss out on the coronation chicken. On the day of cooking, it couldn't be easier. Simply spread some mango chutney on your naans, top with the chicken, and cook until beautiful and golden. I topped mine with some coriander, sliced up, and everybody really enjoyed this meal. So the vegetables are now done with roasting, and I'm going to check on my sweet potato. I love this trick because you're softening up the potato when the oven is on anyway. It just needs to cool down slightly, and then it will be ready for its transformation. So that's looking really good, ready to cool down and be mashed later on. I'm going to let these cool down slightly, and then I will blend them up to make the sauce. Now it's a case of filling my enchiladas and having a little production line going here until the dish is completely full. If you have any spare sauce, you can just pop over the top. And then some of the cheese sauce that I made earlier for various different meals. And I love the fact that you can make one sauce and it can be so versatile across so many different meals. It just adds a nice extra finish to these enchiladas. Then what I'll do is I will freeze, defrost, top with grated cheese and bake in the oven. The cheese goes so golden and tasty on the top of these, and this one went down really well with the kids. So my veg has cooled now and is looking nicely charred. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend this up in 2 batches. The great thing about this sauce is the roasting of the vegetables just packs in a lot of flavour. And if I served the kids courgette, for example, they just wouldn't want to eat it. I think when it's hidden into a sauce, you can often sneak lots of extra vegetables in. I'm just going to take the garlic that I roasted and I'll just squeeze out some of it into here to flavour the sauce. Now, I absolutely love roasting garlic like this, and honestly, I could easily eat a whole bowl of this when it's roasted. It's lucky any of it's made it into the sauce. Next up, I'm going to add in some passata, along with some tomato puree, and then a bit of oregano. I'm not going to season it just yet because I'm going to see how it tastes. Because I've got young kids, I don't tend to add a lot of salt, but you could add some seasoning. So let's get that blended. This is blended up so nicely. This is blended up so nicely and looks so delicious. I'll just give it a taste. For me, I don't think I'm going to add any extra salt and pepper to that point, but you could always add it to your taste. Now, I mentioned before that I like to use one base sauce and turn it into lots of different things. So with this sauce, I'm just going to portion some off, and I will use this as the sauce for some pizzas that I'm going to be making this month. This is much more cost effective than buying a can of pizza sauce, and it's a great way to pack some extra veggies into the pizza without the kids knowing. So these are my 2 pizza sauces ready for the freezer. I'm delighted with how this pizza turned out, and I love knowing that it's got lots of extra goodness packed in there too. I'm now going to blend the rest of the veg with some mascarpone to make a tomato and mascarpone sauce. This has come out looking so delicious. All that's left to do is box it up. Recently, I had the privilege of being interviewed by the iPaper about how I budget for our food spend. And when I was talking to them, I reflected on the fact that our food spend was creeping up, more for matters of convenience than anything else. So when I was thinking about what sauce I'd like to make in this month's batch cook, I took inspiration from one of our easy go-to meals that I knew the kids would eat. And that was pasta with a tomato and mascarpone sauce. You know, like the ones you can get from the shop. You pop it in the microwave, mix it with some tortellini or some pasta, and it's a super easy meal. But what I like about the one I've made today is it packs in a lot of extra veggies and nutrients that the other sauces in the shops don't have. And I've made such a large quantity of sauce that I'm sure it's better value. Let's take a look at the menu for these sauces. Firstly, I'm going to be making a tortellini bake in my air fryer. And the rest of the sauce will be used for simple penne pasta for a quick meal after a busy day of school and after school clubs. I'm really pleased. With just 1 tray of roasted veggies, I've managed to get 4 pasta sauces and 2 pizza toppers, all packed with really healthy and nutritious ingredients for far less than it would have cost if I bought jarred pasta sauces and pizza toppers in the shops. We're now 3 hours into the batch cook. Let's see what's coming up in the final 2 hours. I'm now going to prepare something that I know the kids will love, and that is cornflake coated chicken crisped up in the air fryer. And on one of my most recent YouTube videos where I did a week of air fryer meals, I tested out cooking this chicken from frozen, which I was highly skeptical about, but it did actually work. So true to my word, I said I would stock my freezer with this chicken on my next batch cook, as honestly, it's such a time saver. You'll notice behind me that the lid is actually off the slow cooker, and that's because the sauce wasn't looking thick enough. So I've just taken the lid off to thicken it up before I start assembling my next few meals. I think this would be a really fun recipe to get the kids involved with baking, as they will love this next step where you have to crush the cornflakes using a rolling pin. So I finished crushing the cornflakes and I'm going to pop them in a bowl. Then I've got a little bit of a dipping station going here. So I've cracked some eggs into this bowl. I'm just going to whisk them up. Then I will dip each piece of chicken in some flour, some egg, and then in the cornflakes. This is such a good recipe to do for batch cooking. As you'll see, it is quite time consuming, dipping and coating all the pieces, but it's great to know that these are now in the freezer and I can just get them out on a night where we need a quick meal. There we go, I've got my plate of chicken, crispy chicken, ready to be frozen flat, and that will go straight into the air fryer from frozen. I did the chicken in slightly smaller pieces this time, and I found that they cooked way better and were a much better fit for these burgers. I'm so pleased with how they turned out. Earlier on I mentioned I was going to be using the roasted sweet potato for a pizza recipe. So here is how I make pizza bases using sweet potato. The key is to have really soft sweet potato, which is why I roasted it earlier. And once you've mashed it a little, you can add in any seasonings you want to add. So I'm going to do a bit of smoked paprika. I'm also going to put a little bit of olive oil. And then it's time to add the flour. Now, I will hold my hands up and say, I'm never very good at judging the flour in this thing. So it really depends how much potato you've got. So you just kind of have to add some flour, give it a stir, and keep going until it looks like you can bring it together in a ball of dough that you could roll out into pizza bases. I like this recipe as it's a fun way to add some extra nutrients into pizzas. And on the night where we enjoy these pizzas, I'll get the sauce out, I'll get the bases out, and then the kids can do the topping. It's a ready-made after-school activity, which is also great. It gives me a higher chance that they will eat this pizza and give it a go. So I've now got my dough into a nice consistency and I'm ready to start cutting it up and rolling it out. Now, the size of pizza you do really just depends on your family and your portions that you like to have. So we tend to do 2 pizzas, the adults share one, the kids share the other, but you could roll it out to however you prefer. So I've got that nice and thin. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer them on pieces of grease-proof paper. And this just stops them sticking in the freezer. But also when you come to cook them, you could just put them like that onto your oven tray. Literally just had a genius idea that I could roll them on top of the other bases. So now everything is going to be super flat and not sticking together. I don't know why I've never thought to do it like this before. So I'm now going to freeze these flat, and once they're frozen, I'll be able to pop them in a bag just to stop them getting freezer burn. I love how thin and crispy these pizzas always turn out. It's nearly been 5 hours and I've just got one last job to do. At the beginning of the batch cook, I put the slow cooker on with a beef bolognese, and now I'm going to turn it into 3 different meals. Now, if I'm making a lasagna, it has to be as part of a batch cook. There is no chance you would get me making a lasagna midweek for the kids. And weirdly, I actually think it tastes slightly better once it's been in the fridge overnight or has been in the freezer. I don't know, something about the way it makes the sauce taste. I think it's so much better that way. So I've popped some lasagna sheets in, and then I'm just going to layer some bolognese. I'm so glad I took the lid off the bolognese to let it reduce a little bit. Now I'm using the cheese sauce that I made earlier. And a trick that I learned early on in doing my batch cooking is if I put it in the fridge just after it's finished cooking, it firms up and is much easier to layer into lasagnas and to portion out for sauces. So now the bolognese and the cheese sauce are on the pasta sheets. Just going to sprinkle a little bit of mozzarella on the top, and then I will repeat the layers. I love the fact that within this batch cook, I've made a few staple sauces and base ingredients that have covered multiple meals. Starting with the bolognese, going on to the roast chicken, the hidden veg sauce, and my cheesy sauce. And I really love the cheese sauce in a batch cook because if you look at the meals that I've made this month, from one cheese sauce, I've got some lasagnas, some cheesy chicken enchiladas, mac and cheese, and I'm also going to use it as part of the recipe coming up in a moment. And that for me is what makes batch cooking feel much less overwhelming. Using crossover sauces and base recipes is such a great time saver for me, and I try and do it every time I batch cook. I'm just going to top the lasagnas with a little bit more of the bolognese, and then I like to mix that with some of the cheesy sauce just because it gives it quite a nice colour on the top. Now when these are ready to cook on the day, I will top with a little bit more cheese. These will now go in the freezer and be defrosted thoroughly before baking in the oven until crispy and golden. Now I'm going to split the bolognese between these freezer bags, putting slightly less in the front too, as I've got a couple of extra ingredients to add. So once these have cooled a little, I will seal up these two bags at the back to use on a night where we're just going to have spaghetti bolognese. The kids absolutely love this recipe, and a little sauce goes a long way. And with these two bags, I'm going to bulk them out with some black beans and kidney beans, and then I'm going to use them to top some crunchy tortilla chips to have on a nachos evening. I think bolognese is such a great sauce because you can adapt it across lots of different meals where it can just be the base ingredient. With the chili, I'm also going to cut up some raw pepper, but I won't do that until it's towards the end of its cooking time. I'm adding in a little bit of smoked paprika so that it has a bit more of a chili taste. If you were happy with a spicier taste, you could add some chili flakes, some chili sauce, but because this is for kids, I've kept it quite mild. One other thing that I like to do if we're having nachos is save a bit of this cheese sauce from earlier. So I'm just going to add a little bit of paprika to this as well. And I'll just spoon this onto the top of the nachos when they're cooking. To assemble, you simply add your tortilla chips, nachos and chili to an air fryer to warm through with the cheese sauce, and finally finish off by grilling peppers and cheese until bubbling and golden. Then you can get creative with your garnishes and tuck into the most delicious cheesy nachos. So there we go, in 5 hours I have made a month of food for under £150. If you enjoyed watching this and are looking for more inspiration on batch cooking, check out one of my previous videos, linked above, which gives you more ideas on the great things that you can make and keep in your freezer.